Chapter 2. Yettel continued his movement around the planet as he considered tactics to leave the planet. If the planet is being terraformed, it was highly likely that the ship in orbit was to interact with the work underway, protect the planet from any intruders.
Yettel, I have new information.
Yes, 60, go ahead.
I have determined that there is an asteroid headed towards the planet and should arrive soon. I have plotted the course and expected impact time.
After a moment of thought, Yettel responded, "Thank you, 60. Please position us on the outer edge of the expected impact zone." The 60 ship shifted its current course and headed southern part of the planet. After a short flight, the ship hovered over water not far from a small island where a tower was mounted. 60, we must use the ion engines. Our transwarp capability is unstable if what I expect this tower to do happens. Yettel monitored the approaching asteroid and noticed that the orbiting ship had positioned itself significantly away from the approach pattern. This created an opening for Yettel to plan an escape route. When the asteroid approached the upper atmosphere, Yettel engaged his engines to shoot up the side of the incoming asteroid. As his engines pushed the ship faster towards the massive mountain of rock, there was an unplanned event.
Yettel, there is a significant energy buildup in the local tower. I expect the tower will direct some form of energy pulse towards the asteroid.
Yes, 60, as I expected. Yettel knew that a risk was present. As 60 pushed the engines to the maximum acceleration, the ship quickly approached the asteroid that was encountering heavy friction, shedding small rocks the size of Yettel's ship. With 60 passing the asteroid at damage.
Not sure if the ion engines will survive, but will push as long as possible.
As the ship accelerated, Yettel observed the engine was not working to maximum efficiency. The plasma exchanges continued between the planetary protection ship and 60 as the acceleration headed them beyond the planetary pool and heading out of the solar system. With the planet falling far behind them, the planetary ship slowly backed off and finally left them alone. 60 continued to monitor damage and provided feedback to Yettel. After exiting the solar system, Yettel decided he needed to see if he could repair the engine. 60, give me a summary of the problems. I want to take a spacewalk and see what I can repair.
The plasma nozzle is damaged. The ion chamber has a leak and intake chamber has been clogged with excessive rock from the asteroid.
Can I repair the transwap unit?
No, it was destroyed with the last blast of asteroid material that penetrated our shields.
Okay, not sure I can fix all of this, but let's see what I can do. Yettel put on his spacesuit, picked up a repair kit, added some extra equipment from the storage locker as he prepared to exit the ship. As the airlock opened, he could see damage from both the rocks that penetrated the force field, along with the blast patterns that had only been partially blocked by the shields. Exercising the suit transport jets, he slowly moved to the back of the ship. 60. Make sure the ion engine is fully locked down.
Yes, Yettel, I have locked it down.
Yettel looked at the ion chamber and quickly saw where a small rock had damaged the outer metal shield of the ion chamber. Repair work began. After grueling hours of work, he had been able to repair the ion chamber and worked out the major dents in the engine nozzle. He didn't know if it would hold, but it was better than when he started. He next headed to the airlock for a rest period. After a rest period, options were discussed.
Yettel, I have been able to strengthen the shields. I have run tests on the ion chamber and it appears to be back to 95%. And the output nozzle, while not perfect, seems to be sufficient.
Let's see what we can do to clean up the filters in the front. Yettel donned his spacesuit, exited through the airlock, and slowly drifted to the input chamber. The Ancient One began the job of cleaning up as much as possible. When Yettel reached the inner filter, it was clogged with dust. Yettel removed the filter and decided to take it back inside and see if he could figure out a way to clean it when a warning came from 60.
Yettel, I sense motion of incoming mass. It is traveling fast, so I'm trying to get a better fix on it.
How long do we have?
Sorry, less than a few seconds.
Yettel rushed towards the airlock, but as he was entering, the meteorite field hit the ship, and he could feel pain as multiple hits on his suit took place before the airlock door closed.
Yettel, are you okay? Your vital signs appear to be dropping.
I have taken a few hits. Let me get out of the suit and I can find out better.
There has been a breach of the hull. We are losing atmosphere. I am attempting to repair.
When Yettel removed the spacesuit, he oozed heavily from the trunk of his body, and with the color, knew it was not a good sign. Yettel crawled to his bed and pulled out the medical kit. While he attempted to stem the flow, he knew there was little chance of survival. Still, he continued to use the medical patches to attempt to stem the fluid flow. Finally, with the patches in place, he laid back to rest. Between the serious injury and damages to the ship, he slowly concluded that there was no way he would survive this event. 60 announced.
Sorry, Yettel. Not all the breaches of the hull can be repaired. We are continuing to lose atmosphere.
Weak with the loss of body fluids, Yettel continued to hope. Is there something I can do to help patch?
You must make the patch from the outside of the hull.
Can my spacesuit be patched?
No, we have a few moments left before all atmosphere is gone.
The end was near. Yettel knew that there was no exiting the situation alive. With his logical mind, Yettel decided there was only one thing left to be done. 60, my old friend, prepare the bloom chamber.
Yes, Yettel. It will be ready in a moment.
Yettel reached into the medical kit and pulled out a gold injector. With a steady hand, he held the injector to his body's midsection and pushed the plunger. As he finished the injection with a final move, he reached with his left arm and placed it within the entrance to the bloom chamber. With his last sigh of life, Yettel gasped. Goodbye, my friend. With Yettel's body failure, the entrance of the bloom chamber sealed around Yettel's arm. Chapter 3. It was 1,000 star cycles later before the old ones had extended their technology enough to safely maneuver through the inner parts of the galaxy with their advanced trans-swap capabilities. During one such expedition, in an attempt to update the old black hole sensors originally placed by Yettel, an old one ship's sensors discovered Yettel's damaged ship. The ship had maintained the force field as best as it could. It had been good enough for the ship to survive, despite loss of atmosphere. The mystery of the ancient story ended when they found Yettel's ship drifting on the outer edge of a star. On the singular planet around the star, they found the remains of a failed attempt to terraform for a new civilization, with only small remains of life, but no intelligence. Calling up records of Yettel's discovery, they identified the planet where the great discoverer was attempting to reach. When they had sent a robot to investigate, they found the planet destroyed, probably not long after Yettel's death. It appeared that the planet star had connected with another star, and the dual stars had destroyed any life that the planet previously held. Where or how the civilization had evolved, and why it chose to use the planet, would forever be an unsolved mystery. With the discovery of Yettel's ship, they were able to piece together the final events of the revered ancient hero's life. The one positive of finding his ship was the discovery of the preserved pods. When the ship was discovered, 145 seed pods were discovered preserved in a protected compartment that in ancient times was known as a bloom chamber. Yettel had seen his life coming to an end and protected the pods that were released in the final stages accelerated by the special injection known as the bloom of death. The computers needed to complete the master plan computations. The pod, which was the focus of the computation, was the last of the 145 discovered pods used to develop a being added to the old one's race. This was the last remaining pod from the great ancient Yettel, some of the most treasured pods in the ancient race's history. The overseer had to hurry. The design of the new member of the race was dependent upon this critical computation, and time to inject the necessary DNA changes was running short. While Yexi examined the DNA of the pod, he patiently waited. The master geneticist had worked at this position for most of his life, a life that had seen more than 100 civilizations within the galaxy of Sphexi, requiring movement to be protected. Most of the ship managers involved in those 100 civilization movements had been designed by Yexi. He was a master at his craft. His keen ability to interpret the outputs of the master plan were uniquely recognized within this ancient race. While he had worked with a number of pods created by the dying old ones, every one of the pods coming from the great Yettel had developed to be major leaders and history-making ship managers within the ancient race. This was the last of the great ancient's precious gift to the race. This was his last chance to affect the history of the old ones. Left to their own design, the pods would grow to the traditional design of the race. A tall, green life form, looking to many as a massive plant, with legs, sometimes 3 to 5, and arms, again, 2 to 4, they flowed as strong vines. While for some, this form was perfectly acceptable, to those tasked with first contact, or who would be living for most of their lives with other civilizations spread across the galaxy, a different form was best suited. It was Jexi's task to divine the life plan for each new being as foretold by the master plan, and understand how best to prepare them for their main path in life. When Yexi suddenly heard the computer speak through the connection to his mind, he knew the computation was done. His mind quickly reviewed the output of the complex calculations to determine what this newest member's future would require. This was definitely unique. Yexi requested the computer to recheck the results. After a few moments, the computer returned with a validation of the results. There was a 75% chance this pod would result in an explorer across the universe. This pod would lead the race in one of the greatest explorations in the history of the race. This pod would result in contact with thousands or millions of races, mostly of a humanoid design, and had a strong link to a planetary survey scheduled to take place in the near future. The results were clear, and Yexi had to respect the projections. Yexi enabled the proper injection for the pod to start its continuing development as a semi-humanoid design. It would still have many of the plant traits of this old one's race, but would be significantly closer to the humanoid design than most. With the proper injections, the development of the pod's body design was enabled. Its design was set. The pod was given the name Sexti in honor of Yettel's closest friend, his ship. Now, through the evolved techniques of genetics, new life for the race was born in a small dish, and within weeks evolved to a stage where connections to the communications net occurred. Once connected, the adults took on the job of training the new ones. Training evolved as the body matured, and within a period of 2 cycles around the home star, they were fully grown and fully integrated into the society. New members were created only as needed. Sometimes a member would die through a physical accident. Sometimes the society would decide growth needed to occur as they found new races needing support, and sometimes individuals just wanted to reach the end of their very long lives, naturally. With each member of their civilization being brought to life, a study would be undertaken to see the new life's impact on the master plan. In Sixty's case, the key point he would play in this pattern was soon discovered. It wasn't so much that he didn't have a choice in what his path would be. It was more a case of discovery of a key point in Sixty's life. He still had the excitement of discovering his path, and the analysis only provided the probability of this major event happening, 78%, within the life path and how it crossed with the research work of the connection machine. The 60 pod found itself in the traditional fluid for development. After the correct time, it was moved to the standard incubator for the defined growth period. Yettel kept intense monitoring of the pod as the various stages of growth were triggered. During the fourth stage, the computer reported an abnormality which triggered a signal to Yettel. This stage should have the pod opening up with the small old one breaking into motion. There was no breaking of the pod. The master broke out his examination equipment and began to probe the pod. This breakdown could not happen. The prediction showed nothing like this happening. Effects could give major doubt to their prediction equations, which was also the basis of their belief system. As the probe searched the essence of the pod, a sigh of relief began within Yettel. The pod was evolving, just not the way a standard pod evolved. After collecting his thoughts, the old one began to try to understand why the evolution had shifted. Could it be that the changes in the basic DNA was wrong? This was one of the oldest pods that he had activated, and beyond that, one of the greatest challenges to the pod's DNA he had executed in a long time. The need to make this old one look humanoid was one of the largest shifts that were executed to changing DNA. The master began to try and correct what appeared to be a deviation of the growth sequence. While monitoring the pod's DNA, no matter what he tried, the pod rejected his attempts. Chemical injections were rejected, radiation modifications were rejected, viral DNA splicing was rejected. The pod continued on its own development path. Finally, Yettel gave up and accepted the pod's growth path and waited to see what would happen. The master plan was the extension of the great equations of the universe discovered by the ancient race. The foundation of the equations dealt with the understanding of how the 11 dimensions of the universe expressed themselves in terms of energy waves. The waves were the very essence of the interactions that everything was built from, and resulted in the expressions of forces binding everything from the particle wave packets through the massive gravitational forces interacting across the universe. Each of the dimensions had unique properties, and by making use of the properties, their great technologies were formed. The trans-swap capabilities allowed them to instantly move across great spatial distances. They utilized their discoveries to the benefit of all civilizations in their galaxy. One of the key discoveries supported the instant communications within their galaxy. While this had a limitation requiring them to set up relays to reach across the galaxy, it had combined with their trans-swap technology to engage across the galaxy. Shortly after the activation of the 60 pod, a standard survey ran upon a unique wave pattern on a planet. The wave pattern was a complex, multi-dimensional mixture unlike any discovered before. The pattern was focused on a humanoid, which the local population called the Watcher, due to his tendency to stay apart, but in his personal isolation, watching the interactions of others. Over a short period of time, the ancient race began to understand the pattern-enabled communications across the universe by the proper injection of energy. The ancient race quickly organized a team to research this most unique finding. Over time, it became understood that a Watcher is most rare, but also a most valuable resource that can be found in a civilization. After the pod opened, 60 followed a normal course of development. Over time, 60 developed and went through the standard training approach. The mental communication system was tuned to train 60 in leadership and decision-making. This unique being 60 learned about the non-emotional approach of his ancient race when dealing with other civilizations across the galaxy, with particular attention to the mapping of the universe. 60 was placed in missions of first contact with civilizations across the galaxy. Additional missions, including the shifting of a civilization from a dying star to a new home. 60 came to the end of its training when the old ones that monitored training of new members of their civilization decided it was time for 60 to be given command of a mission.